Hello and welcome to the Grieving Mums Club.
This is a safe space for mothers who have lost a child, a space to remember, to grieve, and to find some comfort along the way.
Before we begin, a gentle content reminder. Today's episode is discussing the loss of a child and the grief that follows. Please listen at your own pace and take a break when needed.
So, episode number 5 at the Grieving Mums podcast. And today we're joined by a very special mum, Ellie, who is here to share her child's story. And when I say child, I mean children with us. Before anything else, we want to start by saying their names because they always matter and they always will be part of this space. So this is to Noah, to Hudson, and to Eden. Today we're holding a space for you. Thank you so much for being here, Ellie, and for trusting us to share your story.
Oh, thank you. That's really kind. That's probably the nicest introduction I've ever had on a podcast.
Oh,
That's really
Well, Ellie, do you
sweet.
want to go by introducing you and what it is you do?
Yeah, so my name is Ellie, or Elle. You can call me either. I don't mind. Answer to both. I'm a lost mum of 3, a mum to 1 rainbow, and a therapist for lost mums. And I've been helping women all across the world for the last 4 years, through any stage of pregnancy and child loss. And it's a privilege to do what I do, but I also wish that my job didn't exist. But I help lots of women through 2 different ways, working with women one-to-one through my program, the Lost Mama Method, and then I also have something I've just made called the Lost Mum Survival Kit, which are 2 ways just to access support because I don't think there's a lot of support available, and that's the main reason why I do what I do, and that's essentially who I am.
Yeah, thank you. And that's
yeah.
reasons why this podcast got formed because we felt like that as well. There
Mm.
wasn't a lot of support for lost mums.
There isn't, and I wish I could say that it was just a UK thing, but it's not. I found it's a global thing, and it's a big issue, but that's a whole other can of worms, and I will get on a soapbox if you get me on that topic.
Would you want to start telling us about how you felt when you found out you were pregnant,
Yeah.
your pregnancy and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, oh gosh, cast my mind back to the start of our story. I have PCOS and struggled to get pregnant. My partner and I had been together for like probably 3 years. We've been trying for 2 of those. As soon as we met very early on, we knew we wanted to have kids, and it just wasn't happening. So I went to the normal routes, went to my doctor, went to a gynecologist. They essentially gave me metformin and letrozole and said, try this and see how you get on. And we'll go from there kind of situations. They gave me 4 months worth, said off you go, see what happens. Very, very fortunate that we got pregnant on the first cycle, and that was the January of 2021. I found out I was pregnant. I've always been like a bit of a bigger girl, so I was like, I know I'm gonna have a bit of a pregnancy belly early on, but I started to show at like 7 weeks and like really obviously show. And I was like, I don't think that's normal. So I called my mum as we all do and was like, what do I do? Um, so she said, why don't you book a private scan and see what's going on? She's like, yeah, cool, no worries. We thought there might have been a chance of triplet of twins because my partner Lewis is a twin, but it normally follows the mum's side. So I was like, I think it must just be a big baby. Anyway, we got him to a private scan at like 8 weeks. As soon as she put the little thing on, we could see 2 straight away. So Lewis was jumping for joy. He's like, I'm having twins. He thought he'd beat his brother because his brother has got a little boy. And we were super happy, and the tech went really quiet. So I panicked straight away, thinking, oh God, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And she looked really worried. She's like, nothing's wrong. I'm just going to go and get the other tech. So I started panicking, thinking, oh God, here we go. She brings the other tech in. They're both really quiet for like a good couple of minutes. And they turned to me and they said, Ellie, do you have multiples in your family? And I was like, no, why? It's just because we found a third hiding behind one of the other ones. There is 1 in each sack, and I was like, please God, don't tell me I'm having 6 because I will die. Um, but so they're like, no, you're definitely having 3, and it was the best case scenario for a triplet pregnancy. It was trichorionic, triamniotic, so 3 different placentas, 3 different sacs. The medication had made me hyperovulate, and we'd caught all 3 of them. It was essentially 3 separate pregnancies happening simultaneously. So obviously we went away and had a massive shock of like, wow, what are we going to do? But after a couple of weeks, we were like, this is amazing. Like, we're an instant family. We're going to have 3 kids, one and done. You know, I was like, I'll get them to whip my uterus out while they're in there taking them out. And happy days. We're all done. We're good. And I went for my first appointment on the NHS at 10 weeks. And they kind of put the fear of God in us in that giving us all the statistics of what happens and higher order multiples of complications and things. But we were assured that we had the best case scenario and that things should be good. And for the first trimester, really, my pregnancy was really great. I didn't really have many symptoms. I thought, this is a breeze. I'm sailing through it. And it got to about 15 weeks, and I noticed that I was losing quite a lot of fluid, which I know is a bit TMI, but I thought this doesn't seem right even for a pregnancy. And I told my doctor, and he was like, "No, you're having triplets. It's normal to lose more fluid and blah blah." But when I say I was losing fluid, I mean like I was either having to wear liners or I was changing my underwear like 3-4 times a day because they'd just be soaked. And I was like, I don't think this is right. But being a first time mum, you trust what your medical team tell you. So I kind of just went with it. It got progressively worse. And I kept saying every appointment that I went to, "Can you please just do the test?" And he was like, "No, you don't need it. You've been overzealous, blah, blah, blah." So again, I kept letting it go, but it was on the back of my mind constantly. And I got to about 22 weeks pregnant, and I'd been to a family wedding, and I just felt awful. And I remember I went to bed on the Sunday in the day, which I never do because I just felt really crappy. And I got up the next morning and I was getting discharged. It was green and it had been happening for about a week and it'd been getting progressively worse. And I got in touch with my midwives and I'm like, "No, well, we think you're okay." And then Monday morning, my mum came over and she was like, "You look like hell. I think we should probably take you to the hospital just to get you checked." So I was like, "Oh, okay," thinking everything was going to be fine. At this point, I was like 23 weeks. So my mum took me into the hospital and I took an overnight bag just thinking, oh, just in case they do any tests. But I genuinely didn't think that there was anything majorly wrong. I thought, they've been telling me for weeks that things are fine. It's just because I'm carrying 3, like it's normal for things to be weird. And I got into the hospital and this was like 2021, so it's still at the back end of COVID and they've been really strict. They wouldn't anybody come in with me. And I saw the panic on the triage nurse's face when I showed her pictures of what I'd been losing. They literally started doing things straight away. They got me on a bed. I had doctors coming and putting like an ECG on me. And I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, I thought we were just coming in to get checked over. And they essentially said to me, "We think that you may have an infection and your heart rate is off the charts. Basically, you're showing signs of sepsis and we're a bit concerned." So they started treating me for sepsis. Me, my naive little mind thinking, "Oh, it's fine. They'll give me antibiotics. I'll be out tomorrow. We'll be good." I didn't understand the severity of the situation because nobody took the time to explain it to me. It was all very hush hush and very told me what I needed to know and wouldn't give me any details kind of situation. And with me being on my own as well, I just kind of took their words for gospel and just kind of thought, it'll be fine. I had a scan that day and they all seemed okay. We did notice, my partner and I, on the scan, that so they all sat in like an upside down triangle. So we had Eden on one side, Hudson on one, and then Noah on the bottom. Me and Lewis noticed that Hudson's fluid level seemed lower than the other two. And again, we were told, no, it's within the normal realms, it should be fine. But I'd said then, I'd been saying for weeks, I think I'm losing fluid, and nobody's done anything. And they were still like, no, like he has plenty of fluid, but don't think that's an issue. So I was like, okay, fine, like I'll take the antibiotics. You should be good to go in 24 hours. I was like, okay, fine. So the next day rolls round, they check me over, they say, "Yeah, we think you should be good to go this evening. We just want to keep you in for a few more tests." At that point, all of my family, like my parents had left, Lewis had left, and the hospital we were at was a good hour away from where we live. And they literally just got home and I just had my dinner and I stood up and my waters broke. And at that point I was like, oh shit, I don't I don't think this is gonna go the way that I want it to go. So I called the midwives in. First time I'd ever met a male midwife, and he was probably the best and nicest midwife I've ever met in my life. And he was like, "It's okay. I've seen this happen to other women. Your waters can regenerate. It doesn't mean it's the end." So I tried not to panic. I obviously called my family, told them to come right back. They took me straight up to the delivery suite. They gave me steroids. They put me on a magnesium drip, which is horrendous. Um, and they essentially said it's just a waiting game. We just have to wait and see what's going to happen. So the next day rolled round and we thought everything was leveling out. I'd been put on bed rest, so I wasn't moving. And they came round to do an ultrasound. And they said, "Do you know that you're in labour?" And I was like, "No, I've had no contractions, I've had no signs, like I feel fine." And they essentially said, "You're in labour." I think I was like 2 or 3 centimetres dilated, and because Noah was so small, he was already descending into the birth canal. So they essentially said, "You're gonna have this baby." They couldn't find a heartbeat, so they told me that he was gonna be stillborn. So they were like, "What do you wanna do? You can either have them all now, or you can have Noah, and we'll just see how you go." That was a better prognosis for the other 2, so I was like, "Okay, well, I'll prepare myself to have this baby in hopes that the other 2 stay in there and keep cooking and do what they need to do, and we can get this infection under control." So that afternoon at 4 o'clock, I gave birth to Noah. I had him naturally, and he was teeny tiny, bless him. He was 1 pound 1. He was born alive after they told me he was going to be born still. So at that point, he was 23 and 2. The hospital we were at could take babies from 22 weeks, so I begged them to do something. And they essentially said, "We can't because you chose palliative care. We don't have the team. We don't have like the crash cart and things." And I went back and forth with them, arguing, like, "You told me he was going to be born still. That's why we chose this." And eventually, it was too late. If anything was going to be done, it had to be done in the first few minutes of him being born. So we had no choice but to effectively opt for palliative care. And yeah, we had 4 hours with him before he passed. Bless him. He tried his hardest, did everything we wanted to do with him that we could. We sang to him, read to him, we changed him, all that stuff. And then the nurses came in and were like, "Okay, do you want us to take him to the chapel of rest? Like, you need to make sure that you're keeping your stress levels down for the other 2." And I'm like, "My child has literally just died. Like, how the hell are you expecting me to do that?" I was never told that cuddle cots were an option or anything like that. It was essentially just a, "No, he's gone. You need to let go." So they took him to the chapel of rest. My mum went with him, bless her. And that was it. My labour stopped, and a consultant came and has effectively said, "We don't really know what to do with you. This has never happened before. We don't want to take his placenta out because we're scared that it might pull the other 2 out, but his placenta is essentially full of infection." So they sutured my umbilical cord, shoved it back inside my cervix, and essentially just said, "We're just going to wait and see what happens." So I really hoped that that would kind of be it, and that they'd stop, and they'd, even if we got another couple of weeks, at that point, every day counts. But that didn't happen. So that was on the Wednesday, and then 2 days later, my labour started again on the Friday night about 10 or 11. And I remember feeling my first contractions that time and thinking, "Oh no, I know what's going to happen." And that labour, God, I felt every single second of that. And I was in labour from 10 o'clock on the Friday night till 6 o'clock on the Sunday morning. And they were effectively like, "You're 10 centimetres, you need to make a decision. They're going to come either way. So either you have them naturally, but it's more of a risk to them, or we can take you for a C-section, but because you have sepsis, it's a much higher risk to you." And I was so exhausted at that point, and I genuinely just wanted them out and alive. So I was like, "No, just take me, cut them out, do what you need to do." Because I was so poorly, they had to put me under general, so I couldn't take anybody in with me, and they had to knock me out essentially. And that's the first surgery I've ever had in my entire life. So I was absolutely terrified. But they took me in for this surgery, they knocked me out. I woke up in a recovery room. I had no idea if they were alive, if they'd made it, what had happened. Somebody came in to get me and was asking me a bunch of questions, and I was like, I don't mean to be rude, but I don't give a shit. Like, where are my kids? Are they alive? Are they okay?"
Yeah.
Me, and they were like, "No, they're alive. They're in the NICU. We're doing what we need to do." So I was like, "Please take me to go and see them." They're like, "Oh, well, you need to rest." And I was like, "No, I need to see my kids." So they wheeled me around in a bed into the NICU, and I was so exhausted. I was fighting for my life, trying to keep my eyes open, but I just wanted to see them. And just even just that couple of days difference made a huge difference. So Noah was born at 23 and 2, and Eden and Hudson were born at 23 and 6, so just under the 24-week mark. But they were like fully formed little people. They just need to put weight on. And they were in these little boxes. And I just remember sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, like that, they're my kids." But they're in these tiny little pink babies in these little boxes that I can't touch. And I have to now trust other people to keep them alive. And it's the weirdest feeling I've ever known. And they took me back round anyway, and I slept it off. And then as soon as I could, I was in there. And then it was just, the next 2 weeks were a blur of just constantly back and forth to the NICU every single day. just hoping and praying they'd make it. And every day one would be doing well and the other wouldn't. And then the next day they'd switch. And I'm sure you guys know, after everything you've been through, you become a doctor yourself after a while. You get so used to all of the medical and all the stats and everything to look for. So I essentially didn't leave their sides. I was expressing milk for them because I couldn't feed them. I wasn't allowed to touch them in case I introduced any bacteria. And it just continued, just in that constant state of anxiety of every day, just hoping for the best but preparing for the worst. And it got to day 8, and the consultant essentially pulled me to a side, and we could see on Hudson's face that his face had changed. He'd gone really puffy. He didn't look well at all. She essentially said that he had a really severe infection, and she said, I've hit it with antibiotics, the equivalent of Domestos, and I cannot budge it. That he might also have meningitis, and he also had sepsis, which he caught from me. And the infection that I had, which was chorioamnionitis, they both had. They both suffered brain bleeds at birth, which is very common with infants born that small. Eden seemed to be improving. They both had grade 3 interventricular hemorrhages, which means it comes out of the ventricles in the brain and was seeping into their brain tissue. Eden seemed to be improving, but Hudson's they couldn't get under control. And they essentially said to us, we can't control his infection. And the only way to effectively stop his brain from cutting out would be to drill through his skull every day to relieve the pressure. But they had no idea what amount of brain damage that would cause, what the outcome would be. And they essentially told me that if he did make it, he would have no quality of life, and the likelihood of him leaving the hospital was incredibly slim. And at this point, I had no idea what happened when you have a child with medical needs, what the protocol is. If I just thought, that's the cards that you dealt, you take them home and you deal with it, and that's it. And she said to us, it's up to you as the parents. If what you want to do, we can keep him here, we can keep him on life support and on a ventilator and all these things. But the likelihood of him ever leaving this hospital is slim to none. So we effectively had to make the choice of what we wanted to do, of whether we wanted to keep him here or take him off life support. And Lewis and I were both of the same mindset that I couldn't live with myself keeping him here for my benefit if he was in pain. So we decided there and then that we weren't going to do that and that we'd take him off life support. So we did that day, and bless him, he was so poorly. We only had 20 minutes with him before he died, just because he had so much going on. And he was so teeny tiny. But we had that whole procedure again of not being told that there was an option of having a cold cot, of having him in the family room with us or anything. So we essentially lost him and then had to hand him to a nurse, not knowing if we'd ever see him again. Yeah. So we were just told that he was going to be taken to be with Noah. And at that point, I was kind of like, at least I know that they're together. That kind of gave me a little bit of comfort. And they were kind of like, you need to stay positive for Eden. There's a chance that she can make it. So we put our grief on the back burner so much because we were just so hopeful that we might be able to bring at least one of them home that might not make it worth it, but at least make some of this pain bearable. And again, we threw everything into try and make to get her through it, and we didn't leave her side. And we got to day 12 and they brought the sonographer around to do an ultrasound of her tummy because her tummy started looking a little bit off colour. And it's a teaching hospital, so she brought a student with her. And I vividly remember her saying to the student, can you see her bowels? Can you spot anything? And the student said, yeah, they're bright. And she said, yeah, what does that mean? And she's like, well, they shouldn't be bright. They shouldn't look like that. And I was like, what the hell do you mean they shouldn't look like that? And they were like, oh, we can't tell you. We have to send this away, get the results back, and then you'll find out. And I was like, please don't do this to me. Like, I can't go through this again. Cried to my consultant for hours because they wouldn't give me the results. And then the next day, on day 13, they came back and essentially said that because she had been poorly for so long and she'd had so many things, and even though she seemed to be getting better, she wasn't ever able to be fed. She was on an intravenous drip to get everything she needed. Because she wasn't able to be fed, she had caught necrotizing enterocolitis, which is essentially, from the limited knowledge that I have, it's where the gut bacteria essentially eats away at itself because there's nothing there for it to digest.
Is that
So,
one?
yeah. So I then basically said, okay, what do we do? Can we fly her to Alderhay for surgery? What can we do? And they essentially said to me, she's so tiny that we don't think that she'd make the journey to Liverpool. And if she did, there is nothing left to save because Neck has essentially took everything from her stomach to her rectum and everything in between. And the consultant said to me, I'm so sorry, but we're in the same situation as with Hudson. She can't survive without a gut, so we can keep her here for as long as you like, but she's not going to live outside of this hospital. So we were like, okay, well, this is it. This is end of the road, end of the line. There's no coming back from this. This is kind of the thing that we were dreading the most. And that sounds awful when you've already had 2 children die, but when you're putting all of your hopes into one making it and they don't, it's a very bizarre situation to be in. And I kind of just went very numb from that point and switched off. So again, we said, well, if we're going to do it, we'll do it today. I don't want to keep her here for our benefit if she's struggling. So we took her off life support. And bless her, she was not ready to give in. She was always the feisty one when I was pregnant with her anyway. But she was not ready to give in, bless her. And we had about 7 or 8 hours with her before she passed. So we were able to do so much more with her. And it was the first time that we actually felt like parents because we had her out of the incubator. She didn't have all of her wires attached to her and they just kept the morphine dripping. So yeah, we did everything that we could do. We gave her a bath, we changed the nappy, we changed her clothes, sang to her, read to her. All of our family were able to have, my parents and Lewis and I were able to have moments with her on their own. And then that was it. And after she'd gone, we were just waiting. The doctors kept coming in and checking her heartbeat event and every now and again, and they kept saying, no, she's still here, she's still here. And then eventually they came in and said, no, we think she's gone. And at that point, the same with both of my other children, you see their colour change very quickly and they go cold very quickly, and it's kind of reality setting in. Okay, this is it. So we gave her to the nurse and we walked out of the hospital, and just that feeling of knowing that, excuse me,
Take your time.
it's always this bit that gets me of leaving the hospital for the final time and knowing that we weren't ever going back, that there wasn't a reason to go back this time. And leaving the hospital with 3 boxes instead of 3 babies when you've had your entire life planned out and it's ripped away from you. And I know you both know that feeling. And I remember leaving that hospital and thinking, what the hell do I do? Where do I go from here? Where does my life go from here? Because they were my entire life. I literally put everything on hold to be their mom, to bring them home and raise them. And it was so idyllic. And I remember feeling so silly for thinking, how could I think that this would go the way that I wanted it to when this could happen? And I had such little support from the hospital in terms of mental health support. I was effectively just given leaflets for different charities and just said, go away and call these if you need some help. And I tried, but they were all so busy and so overwhelmed. And me being an inherent people pleaser was like, oh, no, I feel guilty taking that space when there's probably somebody out there that needs it more than I do. And I just kind of left it and just tried my best to get through it. And it got worse and worse and worse. And it got to a point where I remember just not even being able to get out of bed and thinking, I can't see the point in being here anymore if they're not here, because they're literally my entire purpose, and that's been ripped away from me now. And my mum, bless her, she was really worried. She was like, I think, you need to see somebody. We'll help you pay privately to go and see somebody. So I went to see a hypnotherapist, and she was a friend of my aunt's. And she was really, really great. And she hadn't ever lost a child, but she'd lost a husband. So I thought, okay, maybe she'll understand to some extent what this feels like. Because I couldn't find any private therapists that had any experience with this. It felt so isolating. Even though I had a great support system with my partner and my family, I still felt so alone because I felt like nobody really truly understood what it was like from my perspective. So anyway, I went for therapy and she was amazing and she helped me so much. And she turned to me one day and bless her, she was like, you have the background. Why don't you do this? Because there's nobody out there that's helping other mums that have been through what you've been through. And we both sat and researched and we couldn't find anybody. But that was all I kind of needed to light the fire in my belly. And I'm so grateful to her for putting that idea in my head because it gave me so much purpose back. So I went away, I did my research, I did the extra qualifications that I needed on top of what I already had. And I started to practice. And I started to practice before I went back to my official job because they were born alive, I was entitled to my maternity leave. So I took my full maternity leave, then went back to my office job. And I felt like such a square peg in a round hole. And I felt like I was trying to force myself to live the life that I'd had before, and I wasn't that version of me anymore. So I quit with no plan, really, just a wing and a prayer that this was going to work. And I fully went all in on setting up my practice. And it's the best decision I ever did. And I never look back. Really grateful to be able to help so many people. And it's been really cathartic for me as well, because selfishly, I get to talk about my kids every day. So I love that I get to share them with people. And then a year went by and we decided that we wanted to try again. And I agreed to try again because I thought it was going to take us another 2 years to get pregnant again. And I fell pregnant very quickly. I got pregnant within like 2 months without any help, which was so unexpected. And I found out on my 29th birthday that I was pregnant. And that pregnancy was absolute hell. I always say to people, don't do what I do. I thought, oh, I'm a therapist, I'll be fine. I just raw dogged it and thought, I'll get through it, I'll be fine. I was not fine. I had Sonny and I ended up with really severe postnatal anxiety and depression. And it took probably the first 6 months of his life away from me. I can't remember much of the first 6 months of his life because I was just so fearful of everything. And again, I went for help to one of my friends and it made the world a difference. And yeah, that's kind of back to where I am today. You know, I'm so grateful that I have Sonny. He will be 3 next month and he's thriving and I'm in such a better place now for a number of reasons. And I'll never be one of those people that say everything happens for a reason because I don't believe that's true when it comes to this kind of loss.
Yeah.
But I am truly grateful for them and for what they've taught me. And I wouldn't be here without them. But at the same point, I'd give it all up in a heartbeat to have them back. But we can't do that. So it's essentially where I am.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
You were mentioned about the hospital. Yeah, it's a different type of feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
One that a lost mum could describe.
I think I say this to all of my clients. I think this kind of grief is such a unique kind of grief. That's not to dismiss or downplay anybody else's grief, but when you lose a parent or a grandparent or a sibling, you've had that experience of life with them. You know what their favourite song is or their favourite drink or what their laugh sounds like. We don't have that when we lose our children. We lose all of that and we lose the life that we had planned. We lose every milestone that we look forward to with them. And when those dates come round, that grief resurfaces like it's fresh because it's a brutal reminder of everything that we were robbed of. And I think that's what differentiates this so much is that you're not missing what you had, you're missing what could have been so much more, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does make sense. Mine's more so from a perspective of now, obviously, my situation with Lana, she's now a child.
Yeah, of course.
How hard was it for you to think, you know what, I'm going to try again mentally and go on to have someone? Because that is, for me, I'm so fearful of that. And I think, well, you can survive it mentally.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's a question that I get asked a lot. And I think from what I know personally and from what I've experienced with clients, I think you very much sit in one of two camps. It's either you want to have another baby straight away because you just want a baby in your arms, which is completely valid, or you want to run for the hills because you can't think of anything worse. And I was very much in the second camp. And I'll be honest, I probably could have gone and not had another child and just kind of accepted that that was my life. It was more the fact that Lewis very much wanted to have more, and bless him, he was my rock through all of it, and he was very much like, we can't let this be our story. We can't let this be where it ends. We did ultimately want to have more children. It was just the fear that was such a holdback for me. And I totally get what you're saying. I think your fears are completely valid, especially after everything you've been through. And it is really hard to make that choice. And people ask me all the time, when did you know was the right time? And the truth is, I didn't. I don't think there is ever a right time. I think when you get to the point that the hope outweighs the fear, that's probably the closest you're going to get to the right time. But I agreed to start trying because I thought it was going to take us so long, but I was not ready at all. And when I saw those 2 lines on a test, it wasn't like it was the first time. I cried hysterically for an hour straight because I was like, how the hell am I going to do this? And then proceeded to feel immediately guilty for feeling like that because I was like, it's not fair on this baby. And it's so hard. I will hold my hands up and say pregnancy after loss is the hardest thing I've ever done. And people always look at me weird when I say that. They're like, surely your children dying is the worst thing you've ever been through. And I'm like, of course it is. But when you go through pregnancy after loss, you're carrying all the compoundedness of that grief into another pregnancy and hoping for a different outcome. And I do genuinely believe that it's the only form of PTSD that we expect people to re-expose themselves to in hopes of a different outcome. You wouldn't send somebody back to war and say, oh, it'll be different this time.
Yeah.
You'd be crazy for thinking that. But yet we expect grieving mothers to put themselves in this situation, to go through it, to have another baby without any support. And it's so hard. It really is so hard. Don't get me wrong, I'm really glad I did it now. I don't know if I could do it again, but it's really hard. But I do think it's when the hope starts to creep in and the desire to have another baby outweighs the fear of what could happen. That's kind of the best advice I can give you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
What do you wish people understood about, like what you've been through with only having, obviously you said, I think 4 hours with your firstborn,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. What do you wish people understood more about that, going through what you've been through?
That's a really good question. I think when you lose in that sense, it's really hard. This is going to sound so weird, but it's really hard for other people to see your babies as actual babies because they don't have tangible proof that they were there. Because most people, other than my parents and Lewis and I, nobody saw them. So they saw me pregnant and then they saw me not pregnant. And
Yeah.
it's a lot of people have this notion that the babies just disappear, they just stop existing. And it's like, no, I gave birth to 3 little people. Admittedly, it's not the same as giving birth to a full-term baby, but they were born, they lived, and they died. They had a funeral. They deserve to be acknowledged. And my motherhood deserved to be acknowledged. And I think that's one thing that I struggled a lot with people is their expectations for me to move on a lot quicker than I had the capacity to. And not really acknowledging them or acknowledging me as a mom. So I think that's the biggest thing that if I could give to anybody else who isn't a lost parent is to acknowledge that they're a parent and acknowledge their baby and don't be fearful to talk about them because you're not going to make things any worse by saying their name. That's the biggest thing is people are always so scared to say anything. It's like, you can't hurt me any more than I've already been hurt.
Yeah.
So
No, and I think, obviously everybody's going to be different, but I think as a mum that has lost a child, you want that. You want to talk about them. You want to hear other people saying their name and things. I think that's, important because if that didn't happen, I think you'd feel like they just were gone and that's that. Do you know what I mean? And I think that is really
100%.
important
100%.
to always for people to talk about them and stuff.
100%. I completely agree. I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I give any of my clients is set that boundary and expectation with people around you that, hey, it's okay to talk about them. If anything, I would really appreciate it if you did talk about them, because the biggest thing I see with my clients is difficulties with relationships with family and friends because they don't know how to support them. I do think a lot of fault there is with the people supporting you. It's very easy to figure out what to do to support people nowadays. You have a lot of tools at your disposal, but also they don't have a crystal ball and they don't know what you personally need. So I think the setting your expectations and boundaries with people is always important. But for me, telling people, please talk about them, please share them with me, it means a great deal to me. And I've been very grateful that I've always had that then from that moment on. And you're absolutely right, Chloe. It's so important for people to feel like their baby's memory is being kept alive and people still acknowledge that they existed and they were here and that they matter. That means so much to a grieving parent.
I can remember at Milana's funeral, I said a speech, and my last sentence was, please continue to include my baby girl. Please continue to mention her name, because she still lives, but now she lives through me.
Yeah.
It was a thing that I feared so much. And, even now, like with friends, with family, with strangers, if people say to me, oh, have you got any children? Yeah, I have. I've got a 2-year-old. And Milana will turn 4 in heaven in May. But
bless her.
Still talk as if, yeah, I have got a 2, because I have, she's just waiting for me in heaven.
Of course you have. You had her and loved her for 2 years.
Exactly.
One thing matters and she'll always matter.
She will. And she's so. And one thing I think since losing Milana and being more on the social media platform is understanding that actually our baby's fibers stay on us for so long. That has so much. I wouldn't say peace because I'm not really finding much peace with anything, but it's warmed my heart a little. Knowing that her DNA is still within me.
Yeah, I've heard all about that as well.
Yeah.
And it does. I think things like that do bring you little bits of comfort.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Absolutely. I agree.
One thing I want to ask Ellie, I did a couple of days after losing the babies.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how that felt, between losing them and their funeral, that period, what me and Chloe have described as a complete blur? And you remember how you felt during that period?
Yeah. I'll be honest, I was so incredibly numb. If you'd have seen me in the street, you'd have thought nothing had happened. I was so switched off to it. I think part of me hadn't really accepted that it had happened. Even though, by the time we'd lost Eden, we'd lost Noah nearly 2 weeks before that. I still hadn't fully processed that it had happened. I couldn't ever let my brain go to the point of oh, your babies are literally sitting in a morgue. But my brain just wouldn't. I couldn't let myself go there. And I think part of me knew that if I went there, I would just completely break and it would be like a one-way trip to a padded cell and I don't know if I'd come out of it. So we were staying with family at the time because we lived an hour. So I live in Staffordshire in the Midlands, and we went to a hospital that was about 45 minutes, an hour away. We essentially were told we couldn't come back home when they were in there because if anything happened, we had to be able to get back there pretty quick. So we have family that, bless them, they live 2 minutes away from the hospital. So we were staying with them for virtually from when I had them up until we lost them for 2 weeks, and we carried on staying with them a long time after that. The evening that we lost Eden, my mum and dad came over and all of Lewis's family came round and we all sat and had a curry. And I remember thinking, this is so bizarre. Part of me was so relieved that it was finally over. But then another part of me was I'm literally 2 weeks postpartum and all of my babies have died and I'm sitting at a table with people that I love and I can't focus on anything that's happening. And it was such a weird feeling. And the next day, I remember Lewis's uncle saying to us, they were going out for the day and they were like, look, you can stay here if you want. You can have the house to yourself. But we're worried that you'll just sit and think about it and you'll just cry all day, which I would have done. Or you can come with us and just take your mind off it. So I was yeah, okay, we'll go. And they went to Blackpool because they were looking to get a hot tub and there's a big showroom place in Blackpool. and we went to Lytham St Anne's, and I remember again walking down the beach, and I was like 2 weeks post C-section. I was like, I don't think I should be doing this much. But if any stranger had walked past me, they would never have known that there was a single thing wrong. I was just so out of it, didn't let myself deal with it at all. And it wasn't really until about 2 weeks after that we finally realised that the bubble had to burst at some point, and we went home. And the minute I walked through the door, that was it. I broke, and I don't think I stopped crying for like a week.
Yeah, I think distractions are good in a sense of they do keep your mind off it and they do help you survive. But then I think when it all comes crashing down, it's very, very, very hard.
I agree. I think it's very sudden, isn't it? Because I think you're so numb for so long, and you flip between being numb and feeling everything, and then shoving it back down and feeling numb because you just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then when you do finally open the door and say, okay, I think I need to deal with it now, it's not gradual. It hits you like a school bus, and it's all at once, and it's so overwhelming. And the only way I can word it is that you genuinely feel like you're drowning.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
How long after you lost the babies did you have their funeral?
An interesting subject to cover, because I made a video about this the other day. I didn't go to the triplets' funeral, and it's something that I deeply regret now. But at the time, it's something that I couldn't do, and I held a lot of guilt for myself for a long time for that, but I don't now, because I know that if I'd have gone, I don't know if I'd still be here today if I'd have gone. Put it that way. Everyone is different. I've had a lot of mums say to me, oh, how could you, how could you not be there for them? And I'm like, I had to draw the line in the sand somewhere, and for me, call it selfish, but it's what I had to do to survive, essentially. I think their funeral, I want to say, was probably, we were back home when they had their funeral, so it was probably about 3 weeks later or so. I think it was probably sometime in July. Again, this is how out of it I was, because I couldn't even tell you the date. I don't know. But I was really fortunate that, bless her, my mum planned most things, and we have it's weird to say we have a family funeral director, but we've used the same one for every death we've had in the family. And bless him, he was like, I don't need to worry about anything. Like, don't worry, because the hospital were trying to get us to have them cremated at their chosen place. And it was very like, you can have one person go to like observe it, and that's kind of it. And we were like, we don't want that. So our funeral directors went to pick them up from the hospital, and bless him, he called me and he was like, I don't want you to worry, I didn't put them in the back, like I carried them on my lap, like I've made sure that they're here, that they're safe. He had a special casket commissioned, and they even had to have special permission from the Houses of Parliament, because legally in the UK you can only cremate one person at a time. And I wanted them to all go together. And this is something I didn't find out till months later. I had no idea, but he had to ask for special permission to cremate them all together. So yeah, they did all of it. And I've seen pictures and everything since. I chose the music, chose the flowers, chose everything. On the day, I couldn't do it.
You know, going back to how you said, you know, the hospital didn't tell you about cuddle cots, and I just took them away. Did you ever get an opportunity to see them if you wanted to again?
No. And I don't think it's that the opportunity wasn't there, but we were never told that we could see them. We were never told what the procedure was. I've only found out these things doing what I do now for a job, that, you know, cold cots or cuddle cots are available. You can take them out. They have like special pushchairs you can take them out in if you want to. But I mean, let me put it this way. We weren't even offered a bereavement suite. No provisions. We were told that they didn't have the staff. We were given, other than a bereavement midwife that I saw twice, I think, in the entire time I was there, we weren't given anything or told what we could or couldn't do. It was very much okay, they're gone. we need to take them to the Chapel of Rest now. And that was kind of it. I don't know if I'd have known that we could see them again if I'd have wanted to, just because I struggled so much when they passed with seeing the change in them so quickly. And I know the longer it's left, we would have encountered things like skin slippage and things like that. And I don't know if at the time I would have had the capacity to really process that. But to answer your question, no.
There wasn't an opportunity, no.
No.
No. That's awful.
Yeah, there's a lot of resentment about that.
I can
Yeah.
imagine. So you're just expected to hand your babies over and say, okay, get on with your life now.
Mhm.
That's just
Effectively.
move forward, and it's just anything possible, When Milana passed away, she was at home, but I had a cool blanket because she was too big for the car. I didn't know anything about this until she went into end of life, and then said, as soon as she dies out, you'll get a cool blanket or a cool cot to you.
Mhm.
I didn't know anything, and I'm so thankful they did, because I was able then to keep it home with me for 2 days after she passed.
Mm.
And I'd been told by the end of life nurses, children, especially babies, they change very quickly after death.
Mhm.
I didn't expect how quick Moana was going to change.
Yeah.
But like you say, it's within hours, the change is so done. And looking back, as I say, I wouldn't change anything. I do also look back and think, how on earth did I do it?
Yeah.
How on earth did I do it? 2 days on, and my baby's betting's there, and I'm still giving her a wash, I'm still changing her nappy, I'm still getting her ready for the day.
That's true.
Breathing, Yeah, there's just no words for it at all.
No.
No, no. What would you say to another mum that is going through what you've been through or similar? Any advice or anything that you would say to
That's
her?
a really good question. My first one would always be, don't be scared to advocate for yourself. Don't be scared to push and ask questions and ask for tests. You'd much rather be that annoying patient that keeps on at them and not regret that you weren't able to do anything. But for any mums that have lost, particularly if they've lost multiples, it is a horrendous experience that I wouldn't wish on anybody. And I do think that it's a very unique experience losing them in such quick succession. But just be gentle with yourself, go easy on yourself. You're navigating something that so few people will ever understand, that however you choose to grieve, as long as you're not hurting yourself or you're not hurting somebody else, do whatever you need to, effectively, especially in the first year, just to survive. Just do what you got to do to get through it. Find community, find people who understand, and I'm so grateful there's such a fabulous online space for that. And don't be afraid to reach out for help sooner rather than later. Those would probably be my top things.
And is there anything that you would like to say to your babies before we end?
Oh, that's a good question. I could write a book on things I'd like to say to them, but just that I'm incredibly grateful for them that they chose me to be their mom, even though they couldn't stay. I would do it all over again, just to have the time that we had together. But I'm incredibly grateful that they still show up for me every day. They still send me signs every day. They put me on the path that I'm on now. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. But most importantly, I'm incredibly grateful they sent me their little brother, because having other children never replaces babies, but he's helped to heal parts of me that I didn't even know could be healed. And he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for them being here and not being able to stay. So yeah, I think overall I'm just incredibly grateful for them and really, really, really privileged that they chose me to be their mum.
That's lovely.
Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Yeah.
We are so honoured to have held space for Noah, Hudson and Eden, and to help keep their memory alive. And to anyone listening, if this has resonated with you, please know you are not alone. And if you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, get in touch. This is exactly why the Grieving Mums Club exists.
Thank you for listening to the Grieving Mums Club.
For Mia,
Milana.
and for every child deeply loved and missed, this is for you. We will see you in the next episode.